Welcome to Laughing Owl Productions this evening. Thank you so much for coming. We were very honored to be hosting Joseph Galata this evening with his award-winning performance of Starbright. Laughing Owl Productions has been around for just about 2 years now, and we've done everything from musicals, normal plays, and children's theater, and we're having a blast doing it. We are feeling really ambitious. We're hoping in this next year to host Reno's first International Solo Festival. And that's one of the reasons why we're so excited to have Joseph here tonight. So thank you all for coming and enjoy the show.
So, I want to thank you, really thank you for coming here tonight. I'm going to say to you, and you, and you, and you, and you, three of the most valuable words that you might have heard all day. And if you haven't heard it from anyone that loves you, I hope by the time you go to bed tonight that someone will say those three words to you. And those three valuable words are called, I need you. And I do need you, but not for reasons that you think. I need you because about 3 weeks ago, I got an email. I got an email from the producers of my favorite all-time reality television show. And they saw a little videotape I'd sent them, and they invited me to come to Hollywood and audition to be a contestant on the next year's season. And some of you may have heard the show, some of you may not. For those who have never heard it or watched it, it's called Talent, Truth, or Whoppers. And what the show is about is every episode, people show their talents, and then they tell excerpts along the way of their most deepest, dark mystery story that perhaps they have never told anyone in their life. And then the audience votes. They vote as to how talented the person is, and they vote for whether they think the person's story is the truth or it's just one big giant whopper. So I have the opportunity now to go and audition. So I thought instead of just getting on a plane and flying to Hollywood and hopefully not making a fool of myself, that I would have people here in this theater, and I would show you a little bits of my talent and tell you a story that I've never told anyone. Well, I've told one person, but I'll tell you about him at the end of my story. So, I thank you for coming, and that's why I say I do need you. One of the things that producers told me is that when I'm there, they're going to ask me a series of questions. And I thought, they were kind enough to tell me the questions, so I thought I would test out the answers in front of you and see how it sounds. So the first question they asked me, or they're going to ask me, is, why do I want to be on the show? How much do I love the show? Why is it my favorite show? And I didn't want to give some standard answer like, oh, the demographic ratings, or this and that, or this and that. So what I thought I'd do is I'd tell them a little anecdotal story that just happened not too long ago. This is the truth. This is not a whopper. It was a Wednesday night, and it was the semifinals of last season. And I was not going to miss it, because all year long I had been following one particular contestant and voting for him. He was a 102-year-old man who in every episode dressed as a Spanish flamenco dancer or Spanish bullfighter. He swung from a trapeze that was on fire singing Hava Nagila and other Israeli folk songs. I just thought, my gosh, 102 years old, and you can swing from that the trapeze while you're singing, you got my vote. And in his story, he talked about how he had survived 16 incurable diseases to live to the age of 102. Now, I know a lot of people voted that he was telling a whopper, but maybe I'm gullible, but I just love this man, so I voted for him. So I was not going to miss the semifinals because I wanted to see if he made the finals. However, I had found myself in a little bit of controversy. I was a high school teacher, as you will find out, and I was summoned to appear before the school board that night because of the little dilemma that I was in. You see, I didn't have much of a social life, but I did belong to a film club, and in the film club we met twice a month, and we would sit around and just watch films and analyze them, talk about them. And there was an 86-year-old woman who was there. Her name was Hazel. And her and I just got along really great. I mean, she made the best upside-down pineapple cakes and brownie cookies, and she just made me laugh. And one night, we all had to sit around and we had to tell everybody what was our all-time favorite film and how many times we had seen it. And I made her chuckle and laugh when I said, as a grown man, I had seen 16 times my favorite film, which is Mary Poppins. And she made me laugh hysterical, nearly to the point where I was going to pee my pants, because she had said, this 86-year-old woman, that her favorite film she had seen 36 times, and it was Chainsaw Massacre. And so she came up with this idea, and it was just a cute little idea at the moment. It was that she writes the script, and we get people in the film club to act it, and it's just for our amusement. Well, you know as well as I do that if you make something that's very morbid, and you put it on YouTube or the internet, it goes viral. So here was our little story that was just a cute little story that got me into trouble. We set it in the swamps of Louisiana. That was the setting. And the central character was a boy who had turned 18, who had been raised in the foster care system. He had been put in and out of the foster care right and left, right and left, right and left, always returned to his mother because of him being sexually abused by mama's boyfriends. So the story, the first part of the story was his journey into foster care for all these years about being sexually abused. The second part of the story was how on the day he aged out of the system, we call it, at the age of 18, he decided to have a freedom party. And what he did was to track down all of the mama's boyfriends that had sexually abused him as a child and teenager and invite them to the party. And they were stupid enough to come. And the third part was, on the night, he got them all drunk, and one by one loaded them up in his pickup truck, took them to the swamp at midnight, and they were midnight snacks for the alligators. I mean, it was a cute little film, and we called it Predator Eats Predator. I mean, it was as simple as that. But, you know, my students saw it, and then it went around and around to parents, and then teachers, and then the school board, and that's why I was supposed to go to the school board. But as I said, I was not going to miss the semifinals of Talent, Truth, or Whoppers. So I called the principal and said that my brother died in Minneapolis, and I had to jump on a plane and go visit him. And since nobody knew much about my life, she believed me. I don't have a brother in Minneapolis. And I got to watch the semifinals. Of course, he didn't make the finals, so that was heartbreaking. And it's not because people didn't vote for him, but because he fell off the trapeze and died. But nevertheless, so that's what I'm going to tell them, the people, the producers, when I auditioned, that little story to prove how much I love this show and I want to be a contestant. The second question they said they were going to ask me is, if I won, what would I do with the $1 million? Well, I do belong to a boxing club. So I thought, I know what I'll do with the $1 million. I will produce my own internet web series. It'll be dealing with boxers, only there'll be 2 teams. There'll be 10 boxers here, and there'll be 10 boxers here. These boxers will be representatives of national boxing clubs. And these 10 will be pedophiles from prisons across the country. And in each episode, the boxers from the clubs and the pedophiles from the prison will beat the crap out of each other. And then the audiences will vote who was the best boxer and who was the worst pedophile. And then I'll win because I'll be the judge. And then I'll have all that $1 million. And it's going to be a simple show right on the internet. It's going to be called Pulverizing the Pet Predator. So that's what I'm going to tell the judges I do with $1 million. Now, the third question they said they're going to ask me is, why do I want to be famous? Why not? I mean, if you're famous, you know what? You're no longer invisible. People listen to you. They see you. Even if they don't like you, they hear you. You get lots of money in many cases, even endorsing products that you don't even like. You get to hang around fancy people and rich people. You're made to feel important. Maybe you're made to feel that you're blessed. Maybe you were born under this great astrological sign, or it's karma from the past life, or you have some special guardian angel, or even God loves you more than he loves the janitor down the street. So there's benefits to being famous. Well, there is one more reason I want to be famous, but I'm not going to tell you right now. I'll tell you at the end of my deep, dark story, mystery story, and then you'll understand why this show is so important to me. So, the first thing, I thank you for listening. So I'm going to show you now a little bit of my talents, and then I get the courage, I get the nerve. I'm going to tell you a story that I have never told anyone except one person. So the first talent I'm going to show them that I can do is cook. Now, I thought about auditioning for a cooking show, because they're a dime a dozen, but I wouldn't get to show you my other talents. So I'm going to show them how to make a Middle Eastern salad. Does anybody know how to make a Middle Eastern salad? Do you? It's called salada, and it's very simple. So I'm going to show this on television. You take an onion, you cut it up. You take a tomato, cut it up. You take a cucumber, cut it up. You take parsley or cilantro, and you cut it up. You mix it all together. You can put some garlic in it, and then you put the oil in it, and then you have a salad. And it's a delicious Middle Eastern salad. So that's the first talent I'm going to show them, my cooking talent. You see, I know how to cook Middle Eastern food, though I never show it anybody or tell anybody. Because you see, my mother was from Iran, and my father was from this impoverished little mountain village in Afghanistan. For the first 7 years of my life, that's where I lived, in this little village in Afghanistan. Except for one thing, I had a perfect 7 years. You see, I was known in the village as a pari. Does anybody know what a pari is? A pari is a Middle Eastern mythological figure. It is the most beautiful angel in heaven. In fact, the pari is so beautiful that all the other angels in heaven plot how to kick him out of heaven and send him back to earth. And then he has to spread beauty around the world in order to earn his way back into the good graces of the other angels. I was so beautiful as a child People thought I was a pari. Now, I know here in America we see a cute little kid and we pinch his cheeks and say, oh, he's so cute. No. That wasn't me. I was gorgeous. I was a beautiful little boy. You're probably thinking, oh, this story really is a whopper right now because you don't look so beautiful right now. But hey, I'm 64 years old. What do you want? But I was a pari. The old ladies in the village, we call them canoe. That's our word for absolute respect, canoe. The canoe would come and touch my cheeks like this when they had problems in their family. Maybe someone was ill, or someone was down on their luck financially, or somebody was missing, or somebody ran away. The canoes would come and they would touch me, put their fingers down my cheeks and ask for blessings. So that made me happy that I was so beautiful and so loved by the canoe. The other thing that made my childhood for those 7 years so great was I was born with this gift to dance. You see, all parties have a gift, and mine was dancing. When we would have weddings in the village, or celebrations like Nowruz. Nowruz is the Persian New Year. When the old canoe, the ladies, would get done serving all of the kebab and the lamb and the yogurt and the bread to all of the men then would pick up the instruments, and they would start to play the music. And the old canoe would go over to the side because women were separated from the men. But I'd always dance with the women. The old canoe would say, dance, dance, dance. And that was my signal when they would go, and I would dance for the old women. And they would all clap. But the only thing that made my childhood for those 7 years so desperately miserable was my father. You see, my father was a very unhappy man. My father had this job that really didn't have any title. His role in the village was to get up every morning and take his cart and his ox and drive through the village collecting the buckets of human waste that people had overnight. And then he would take the buckets of human waste and go up to the mountains and bury it and use it as fertilizer. My father hated my guts, as we say in English. I knew my father hated my guts because I was invisible to him, even though I lived in the same house as him, if that's what you want to call it, houses. We had more like huts. My father wouldn't look at me, and my father wouldn't talk to me. When we sat down to eat breakfast or supper, I would never say to my father, pass the yogurt, or pass the bread, or pass the tea, because he would ignore me. He didn't do it to my brothers and sisters. I never understood why he didn't talk to me, why I was invisible to him. I'd ask my mother, I'd say, Mama John, why does Baba John hate me? Why does Baba John hate me? And all Mama John would say is, go and be a good boy. Go and be a good boy. That's all I heard for the 7 years of my existence as a child in that village. Mama John saying, go be a good boy. Go be a good boy. One day, I was with my older brother and we were milking the goats. And I looked up and I saw my father looking at me. And he was mumbling something, but I couldn't tell what he was mumbling. And my older brother, was laughing. And I said, well, what's so funny? And he just kept laughing, and my father just kept staring at me, mumbling. And I said, what's Baba John saying? What's Baba John saying? I don't understand. And my brother said, he's calling you a kesefat, a kesefat. Well, in our dialect, a kesefat means the equivalent of human waste. My father thought of me in the same vein that he thought of the buckets that he emptied in the fields every morning. So one night when I was 7 years old, we had a big village wedding, and people came from all these other villages. And there were two men that came, and I knew they were very important men because in our culture, when a man is of esteem, we don't offer him a cup of tea, we offer him a bowl of tea. And I saw my father going up to these two men, who came with servants and came with beautiful kaftans. And I saw my father always offering them bowls of tea. And I thought, I'd never seen a movie, I never saw a film, I never saw a TV show. But perhaps these are men who make movies and TV shows in the big city. And maybe they've heard about how beautiful I am and how I dance. And they came here. And maybe they would see me dance when the canoe go, And then maybe they'll take me to the big city and they'll put me in movies and they'll put me on television and then they'll give me money and then I'll be important and I'll be famous and then I'll come back to the village and I'll give my father the money and then I won't be invisible to him anymore and he'll love me. Childhood imagination, or you might call it hope. The next morning, I woke up and I knew something was different because my mother let me sleep in and it was my job to take the lambs to the field. So when I stepped outside, I saw my brothers and sisters doing my work, and I saw my mother beating the rug with her broom and not looking up at anybody, not talking to me. And I saw my father talking to the two men, and then I saw them pointing at me. And then suddenly, one of the men gave my father a pouch of coins. I thought, why is he giving my father money? And when I saw that, the men's servants grabbed me and pushed me and pulled me to the cart that they had come in, and I didn't understand what was happening. Well, what's going on here? My mother's not looking at me. My brothers and sisters are now with my father. They're hunched on the ground. My father's on his hunches, and they're counting the money. Nobody's saying goodbye to me. Nobody's telling me what's going on. I've been pulled into a cart. I got two men, servants holding me. The two rich men are in their cart. We're driving away. Nobody's saying anything. My mother's not coming after me. My brothers and sisters aren't watching. My father's counting his money. Nobody's telling me anything. Where am I going? It took about 2 days to get to their village. And for those 2 days, nobody said anything to me. And every time I tried to ask a question, I got slapped. Every time I tried to jump out of the cart, they held me down. They did give me stuff to eat. When we got to their village, it was a beautiful home. And when they walked me through the courtyard, I saw servants. And I saw children, my age and older. They took me upstairs and put me in a room, but nobody explained anything to me. This old canoe came up 3 times a day to give me food, and when I'd ask her questions, where am I, why am I here, when am I going home, she wouldn't say anything to me. She would just say, shh. But I would look out the window and I'd see boys. I'd see boys my age, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. They were playing what we call soccer. Back there it's called football. And they would be laughing and having a good time. But then there was these other boys. They were like 12, 13, 14, 15 years old. They were always sitting around. Some of them were always smoking or reading books or playing cards. But the one thing I noticed, the boys my age were having laughter and fun. And the boys older didn't look like that. One night, the canoe came up and said, "You're going to dance tonight. The men are having a celebration. And after we ladies, we women feed them, you will dance for them." And I thought, oh, now I will get to dance. And they will give me money and I will go home. So then, she came up with this beautiful blue caftan. I had never seen anything so beautiful. She put it on me. It felt so good. And then she gave me a pair of pantaloons. I had never had a pair of pantaloons. She told me to put them on. And I did. I felt very special. I had never had such nice clothes. She took me downstairs to the courtyard, and she put some scarves on me. And I saw the scarves, and I saw the boys dancing, and I watched them, and then I noticed something. They were girls' clothes. She had given me a girl's caftan. She had given me a girl's scarves. When all of the boys were finished dancing, I saw the younger boys going off into a room, laughing, but I saw the older boys going into another room. And then she said, "It's your turn. Now you must go dance as a pari." And I said, "But why am I wearing girls' clothes?" She said, "Because now you are no longer a pari. Now You are a bachibazi. A bachibazi is a boy. Dances for men as a girl. And so I danced for the men. I loved it. The men, they threw coins, and I was happy. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, and I danced for the men, and I loved it. They fed me all day, all the pistachios I could eat, the oranges, the pomegranates. I had fun with the boys. We played soccer. I read books. I learned to read. And then one night, I was 12 years old. And when I was dancing, I had seen the 2 men who had bought me from my father. I saw them going to a man and offering him a bowl of tea. Though what was special about it was that I knew this man was very wealthy. I didn't know who he was, but I could see by the way he dressed and the 5 or 6 servants that he had surrounding him. Everybody bowed to him. He was a handsome man, in his 30s, maybe 40s. He had a long black beard, beautiful black hair, wore a turban made of silk. And while I danced, he smiled at me, larger than the other men's smiles. I didn't pay much attention to it other than that, except when I finished dancing, instead of taking me to the room with the little boys that I had grown up with now for 5 years, they took me to the other room where the older boys went, where I had never been. But there was no food in there. There was no samovars or tables with fruits and dates. I just sat on the floor thinking, what did I do wrong? Did I not dance well enough? Was I not beautiful enough? Why am I being punished? I don't know how long I sat there, but then the door opened, and one of the men who bought me from my father came in with this distinguished gentleman. The distinguished gentleman, gave the man who bought me from my father coins. And I thought, what is happening? What is happening? The man who bought me from my father closed the door and left me alone with this man of distinction. He snapped his fingers, summoning me to walk forward, and I did. And then he summoned it again, and I walked forward. And then he summoned again, and I didn't know what to do because I was right in front of him. And then he took his hands, and he took a hand and he put his fingers down my cheek, and I thought, oh, he thinks I'm a pari and not bachibazi. And he wants a blessing. Maybe he has a sick child at home, or his wife is ill. But then he did something that no one else had ever done. None of the Kanums had ever done it. He took his fingers and he put them all over my lips, and I could taste the yogurt that he had been eating. And then he took his hands and he put them all over my face, and my stomach was shaking because no one had ever touched me like that. And then he put his hands over my hair and down, and then he felt my arms and my stomach was shaking. I didn't understand what was happening. And then he put his hands on my chest. And then he went lower and lower and lower until he put his hands on my dudul. And no man had ever touched my dudul. Nobody had ever touched my dudul. He had his hands there, and I jumped back, and he laughed. And then he snapped his fingers again and motioned for me to come, but I wouldn't go. Nobody had ever touched my dudul, but he was laughing and he was snapping, and I wouldn't come. And then he came to me and he hit me. And then I was stunned. I didn't know what was happening. And then he was still laughing, and he hit me again. And then he grabbed my hand and he put it on his dudul, and I screamed and I jumped, and he laughed. And then he held me tight, and he said, "Now you are my Bakshibazi boy. Now you are mine. You are coming home with me." And I said, "I don't want to go home with you. I want to stay here." And he hit me. He said, "From now on you will call me Texer." In our dialect that means, "Your Excellency." And he said, "When I tell you to do something, you must always say Tulus, Tulus, Kalus, Tulus Kalus, which means I am your slave." And then he let me go. I sat on the corner, on the rug. I didn't know what was happening to me. And then his servants came in, and they picked me up, and I tried to fight them off, but they were too strong. And they took me, and they put me in the cart with him, and he was laughing, and the servants were holding me down, and nobody came to say goodbye to me again. Nobody told me what was happening. I didn't know where I was going again. I didn't want to leave. It took 3 days to get to his home in another village. Nobody would tell me anything, and when he took me to his home, it was a beautiful mansion and a big courtyard with servants all over the place. When the door opened, there was this wife, his wife, one of his wives, and she opened the door, and she had a snarl on her face like I was some kind of dog with rabies and foam coming out of my mouth. I could see how much she hated me. And then this old Kanoom, that was his mother. She came and she took me by the hand and she took me into her kitchen and she sat me down a stool and she gave me goat's milk and tea and dates and cookies, but I couldn't eat anything, and I kept asking her, "Where am I? What am I doing? What is happening to me?" And she wouldn't tell me anything, and then she took me by the hand and she walked me up the stairs to the outdoor balcony. And that's when I saw the pillow and the blankets, and she said, "This is where you will sleep." And she said to me, she knelt down by the blankets, and she said to me, "You must remember what I have to tell you. 3 things. One is, you must never make my son angry. You must always do what he tells you to do. You must not try to run away, and you must not cry. 2 is, when you see a minotaur, you must close your eyes so you don't die of fright." I said, "Kanoom, Kanoom, what is a minotaur?" She said, "A minotaur is a man, but with the face of a dragon, and the body of a lizard, and the eyes of an eagle, and he smells like a skunk. You must close your eyes so you don't die. And then every night you must come here to your bed on the balcony, and you must find a star, and you must look at that star, and you must say, 'Starlight, Starbright, first star I see tonight, I wish I may, I wish I might, I wish I might not die tonight.'" I laid there for 3 or 4 nights. She came and fed me, but she never talked to me. And then one night, the man's ugly wife came to me and said, "You will dance for my husband's guest tonight, and you will dance beautifully, and you will smile beautifully, and you will make my husband proud of you." So that night, I danced for the men, but I didn't smile. When I finished dancing, the servants took me into an empty room. And once again, I just sat there doing nothing, waiting. The door opened, and His Excellency came in with an old man that was so ugly and old. When he smiled, I could see he barely had any teeth, and the few teeth that he had were brown, and he stunk. I could smell the garlic and the onions from the shabab and from the yogurt. I could smell the tobacco all the way across the room. He stunk so bad I couldn't breathe. Texer left me alone with that man. The man snapped his fingers and summoned me, but I wouldn't move. He approached me, and I backed away. I could see the anger on his face as he was snapping, and I kept backing away. Finally, he came up to me, and he grabbed my hair, and I tried to fight him off, and he hit me like this. And then I looked in his eyes and I held my breath because I didn't want to die, because I knew he was a minotaur, and I closed my eyes. But when I closed my eyes, he took my hand and he held it. And I knew not to fight, not to cry, not to try to run away. And then he took his hand and he put it underneath my pantaloon, underneath my loincloth, and he stuck it down on my dudul. I cried, I screamed, I tried to kick him, but he hit me with his elbow. He took his hands out of my pantaloons. I tried to back up to the corner, but the old man just approached me and he started kicking me in the leg. And I was trying not to cry as I just stood there in the corner, and he was hitting me on the head. I fell to the ground and he's screaming at me to open my eyes, and I wouldn't open my eyes because the Kanum said, "Don't open your eyes or you will die." But he kept hitting me and kicking me, and finally I opened my eyes and I saw him, and he had pulled down his pantaloons and he had pulled up his kaftan, and he had pulled over the loincloth, and I saw his dudul, and it's the first time I ever saw a man's dudul, and it was ugly. And he pulled me up. I don't know where he got the strength, the old stinky man, but he pulled me up and he grabbed my hand and he made me put it on his dudul, and I passed out. I fainted. When I woke up, he was gone, but I couldn't walk because I saw blood running all down my legs. I tried to stand up, but I kept falling down, and I didn't know at first where the blood was coming from, but then I knew. 12, 13, 14, 15 years old. I danced for the men in the courtyard, and I serviced them with my koon and my hands and my mouth after I danced. Then one day, something even worse seemed to happen. I was 15 years old, and I got pimples. Now, no teenage boy wants pimples, but when you are a bachi-bazi boy, you can't have pimples because you're no longer beautiful. So a servant came, took me through the mansion, out the courtyard, out through the gate, onto the streets, and locked the gate, and I was alone all again, by myself on the streets. Nowhere to go, no money, no one, for the third time in my life, saying goodbye to me. And so I did what all bachi-bazi boys do when they are kicked out. I did what I needed to do to survive. I danced on the streets for people to throw coins. I serviced men in the back of alleys because no man would hire me to work in his shop. No man was going to let me marry their daughter. Sometimes I was a pickpocket and I stole, and the police would arrest me, but when they put me in jail, being a 15-year-old boy, what do you think I did? I serviced the policemen. I danced for them, and I serviced them with my koon. I thought I'd rather die when I started selling opiates to people, to other young boys. I saw the other former bachi boys who were now 18, 19, 20 years old lying on streets filled with opiates, heroin, and I thought that's going to be me. So, with this part of the brain saying hope, 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 and this part of the brain saying stupid, 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 I made my way back to the village where I came from. I thought perhaps when my mother saw me, she would cry, she would embrace me. Nobody recognized me, not my brothers or sisters. Nobody recognized me until my mother did. Then she started screaming at me, "Get out, get out, get out." Then my brothers and sisters saw what was happening. They started throwing stones at me. Villagers came out. They now recognized me. They knew I was bachi-bazi. They started calling me names, Kesafat, Kuni, Kuni, screaming at me, Kuni, Kuni. Kuni in our dialect is the English word for faggot, faggot. My father heard the noise. My father heard all of the commotion. He came running down from the field with this bucket of shit, and he threw it at me, screaming every obscenity in the world. I ran out of the village, But when I got to the line of demarcation, I wasn't going to let me go without revenge. I stood on a boulder and I shouted as loud as I could, pointing to my father. I thought, if you're going to humiliate me and hate me, I'm going to humiliate you even more. And I screamed in front of everybody as loud as I could, Takmak! Gelak! Bakhom! Meslak! Sak Bismillah! And I walked away. Roughly translated, it means, may your balls get tied in a knot and may you die like a dirty dog. But I humiliated him. I had my moment of revenge. So I went back to the city to do what I needed to do to survive. But my Fatum smiled at me. You see, Fatum is your guardian angel of destiny. And my Fatum suddenly showed up because my Fatum brought me a man, a businessman from Dublin, Ireland, and he became enchanted with me. He didn't care I was bachi-bazi. Maybe he didn't even know at the time. He told me that he could take me back to Dublin and he could put me to work as a dancer. I said, but I don't have any ID papers. I don't have identification. I don't have a passport. He said, oh, I'll get you one. And he did get me one. And from him I learned the 3 things every homeless, abused child needs to know in order to survive. He taught me the importance of the art of manipulation, the art of lying, and the art of money. He got me papers, and I went to Dublin, and he was so good to me. He taught me to read and write in English. He taught me to get rid of my accent so no one would know I come from Afghanistan. He would give me books to read. Oh, I couldn't understand most of them. I couldn't relate to Romeo. I couldn't relate to Heathcliff and Wuthering Heights. I couldn't relate to Hamlet. But I could relate to all the boys in the Charles Dickens stories. I could relate to Oliver Twist and David Copperfield and Tom from Bleak House because they were the orphans that nobody wanted. They were the misfits like me. And he did put me to work. He told everybody that he had found me in Hungary and that I was a dancing gypsy street kid. And he was so impressed with me, my beauty and my dancing, that he put me to work as a Hungarian gypsy dancing clown in the Irish circus. And he gave me a new name. My name was Myoso. And when I become famous, I'm going to be famous known as one word, Myoso. Because if you're really famous, like, and you have one word name like Cher, or Barbara, or Madonna, or Trump, or Clinton, or Rockefeller, or Einstein, or Bon Jovi, I know that's 2 words, but it sounds like one. If I'm famous by Myoso, it's an Irish word meaning street dancer, Irish gypsy word meaning street dancer. And guess who I danced with in the circus? I danced with a dancing bear! I loved it! They would play the music and me and my bear, we would just dance! I loved it! We traveled all over. We went through all England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales. We went to Germany, to Denmark. We went all over to France, to Paris. Oh, I had such a good time. We went to China. We went to Japan. I just loved it. But no matter where we were, and no matter all the smiles that I saw of people, I was always so afraid that somebody from the audience was going to stand up from the bleachers and point the finger at me and say, Kesafa, Kuni, Kuni, Bachi-bazi, Bachi-bazi. It never happened, but oh God, I was so afraid. I was so afraid. Because you see, I had a new identity. But it wasn't a true identity. I still knew who I was. We went to America. We traveled and performed in the circus. in Florida and Chicago and New York and Pennsylvania and Texas and Kansas and Chicago and Seattle, and then we went to Los Angeles, and one night during the show, he had a heart attack and died. I know, I'm not dumb. I know that he didn't plan to die, he didn't plan to abandon me, but that's what it felt like. What was going to happen to me? So the circus people decided to go back to Dublin. Only somebody at the customs agent in Los Angeles was kind of smart and saw that my papers were false. They put me in jail for a while, not knowing what to do with me. I was now 21, so they couldn't call Child Protective Services. They let me go, I don't know why. I met another young man who could play the drums. So to make a living, we would put the drums out on Hollywood Boulevard, and when tourists came, he'd play the drums and I'd dance, stomp, twirl, shake. People would throw their coins. When we weren't making enough money, it's a wonderful place to go, the Hollywood Public Library. You don't have to go in it, because it's in a dark alley behind it. Doesn't matter if men are from Afghanistan, impoverished villages, or if they're from Chicago or Kansas. Doesn't matter where, there are men out there that like their pretty young men. And I made a living behind the alley of the Hollywood Public Library. I knew that I was pretty much on the path of self-destruction. So I did what any 21, 22-year-old normal young man would do in Los Angeles or in America. I got married! I married this woman who absolutely was head over heels in love with me. God, she loved me so much, she believed every goddamn story I ever told her. I told her that I was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and my father and mother were Irish Roman Catholics, and my father worked in a steel mill, and my mother was the altar lady president of the Society for Divine Daughters or something like that. And I told her that they were killed in a car crash, and me and my little brother, we had to go to foster care, and that we were separated because people adopted him, but nobody wants to adopt a teenager, and that someday I was going to I was going to become rich, and I was going to become famous, and I was going to hire this detective better than Sherlock Holmes, better than Agatha Christie, and I was going to find my little brother, and we were going to be reunited forever and ever, and live happily ever after. She believed it. The only thing she couldn't believe is when she'd say to me, "Tell me you love me." And I'd say, "Oh, I love you." I was a failure in bed, so she got on this kick that we would lay in bed and watch porno. I wanted so much to tell her that a child who is porno doesn't grow up getting his kicks watching porno. She sent me to a therapist. He was such a nice man. Sometimes I would see the tears in his eyes when I tell him my stories. Of course, they were all lies. I would sometimes walk out thinking, God, if I told you the truth, you'd probably be laying on the floor, curled up in the fetal position, having seizures. Finally, one night I came home and her bags were packed and she was gone. At least she did say goodbye in her own way, because 3 weeks later I got divorce papers. So that's another reason why I want to become famous. She might watch the show. She might forgive me and know that I'm okay and I survived. And maybe if I won the money, I could send her some. Because she did pay for my college. You see, I went to college and I became a teacher. What do you think I majored in? I majored in drama and literature. Why not? What movie have you seen lately? What book have you read lately where there's at least not one character in it that's a master of manipulation, lies, and money? So I became a high school teacher, drama teacher. I was so successful. Really, I was just so successful that 3 years in a row my students voted me Teacher of the Year. Everybody loved me. I would take my kids and I would pick certain ones. Like, for instance, I'd always pick the prettiest girl in the class who was the prom queen or homecoming queen, and the boy, the handsome boy, who was the football player. And I'd show them the film Long Day's Journey into Night, based on the famous play by Eugene O'Neill. And I'd have the boy, I'd have him memorize the lines of the husband who's so worn out from his wife's heroin addiction, played in the movie by Jason Robards. And Mary, the heroin addict, played in the movie by Katharine Hepburn. And the boy, I would work with him to try to get him to sound like Jason Robards. I've spent my whole goddamn life believing in you. And then I'd take the prom queen girl and have her say the lines of Katharine Hepburn as the drug addict. I don't know what you mean by believing in me. All my life I've ever felt is distrust and suspicion. I would always pick the misfits of the class. You see, drama and theater are the best places for misfits because every kid needs a sense of belonging to a community. And when you're a misfit, you don't have a community. But if you come into theater, we're all goddamn misfits. These kids just loved it. And I would show them these films like from Europe. Ingmar Bergman films. Like my favorite one was from The Seventh Seal, where the main character was Death. And I'd have the kids act it out. Over there, the dark, stormy skies. The severe master of death invites them to dance. And they dance away from the dawn into the dark land, where the rain washes away the salty tears from their cheeks. Oh, my misfit kids love it, especially the gothic kids. Oh my God, they were in seventh heaven. I had another one day call me and said, for 3 years I couldn't get my kid out of bed to go to high school. Now he's up at 4 in the morning getting all dressed. Oh. And then I would always pick the one boy in the class. You know who the boy was? The boy with the most pimples. The kid that nobody wanted to eat lunch with. The kid that nobody wanted to share a locker room with. The kid in the phys ed class that always had to stand there when all of the athletes picked the teams, and he was always the last one left standing there knowing nobody wanted him, and the coach would go, you go over there, and the kids would moan and groan. So I'd pick him and I'd say, you're going to be the star of my Charles Dickens festival. You're going to read the part of Tom. He has his revenge. There is an atom of Tom's slime, not a cubic inch of any gas in which he lives, not one obscenity and degradation about him, not an ignorance, not a wickedness, not a brutality of his community, but shall work its retribution through every order of society up to the proudest of the proud, and to the highest of the high, and verily what with tainting, plundering, and spoiling, Tom has his revenge. Plundering, spoiling, I knew all about it, distrust, suspicion. I was a wonderful teacher. But I also know I was on the path of destruction. I had no friends. I had no social life. And I was drinking and drinking and drinking. And it wasn't Kool-Aid. One night I was drunk and I was watching television, and there was this man peddling his book about forgiveness and self-help and healing from childhood wounds and the inner child stuff. So I went to the bookstore and I went to the self-help section. And I saw all these books, and I didn't know which one to buy, but I bought one whose title struck my fancy. It was called I'm Okay, You're Okay, Despite the Fact I Killed My Mother. I bought the book, and it said you had to have spirituality in order to heal. I didn't know anything about spirituality. So I thought, oh, the man who rescued me and took me to Dublin, he was Catholic. And I used to go sometimes to church with him. So I went to a Catholic church, and I loved it. I loved the music. I loved the statues. I would spend my nights sometimes sitting in the library reading books on the lives of the saints. My favorite two saints was Saint Dymphna. Saint Dymphna was an Irish little princess in the 13th century. She died a martyr because her father, the king, tried to have sex with her and she wouldn't give in to incest, and so he murdered her. Saint Dymphna is the patron saint of the mentally ill. I ordered so many Saint Dymphna holy medals. I wore so many around my neck, you thought I was a walking Saint Dymphna healing shrine. My other favorite saint was Saint Jude Thaddeus. He's the patron saint of possible cases. You pray to him if you think things are impossible. I know that sounds stupid maybe, but to me it wasn't. I prayed to St. Jude that nobody would ever find out that I was a bachi-bazi boy. Nobody in America even knew what bachi-bazi was, but I prayed to him every night. The problem is, every time I prayed to St. Dymphna and St. Jude, I always got invaded by this other saint, this St. Sebastian. Some of you who are art lovers, you may have been in museums or art books. You might recognize him. Many people painted him. He's the young, beautiful teenage boy who's wearing a loincloth and he's tied up against a tree and his back is arched and arrows are piercing him. That was my saint. That was me, St. Sebastian. I made a rotten Catholic. I loved it, but I was a rotten Catholic because you had to go to confession, and the purpose of going to confession was to confess your sins, and when you leave the confessional booth, you were supposed to have your sins forgiven, but it's a sin if you lie in the confession. So all the priest would always say, I'd say, bless me, Father, for I have sinned. It's been a month since my last confession, the following are my sins. And then he'd always say, have you had impure thoughts? And I'd say, no, Father. He'd say, are you sexually active with a woman? I'd say, no, Father. He said, do you play with yourself? I'd say, well, no. I wanted to say I played with Tom and Jerry, but I really didn't, but it just felt like a sarcastic comment because I was so offended. But I lied in confession. And then you can't go to communion on Sunday mornings at Mass if your sins aren't forgiven. Well, obviously my sins weren't forgiven, but if you go to communion, if your sins aren't forgiven, it's other immortal sin. And then you really go to hell. But if you sit there and you don't go to communion with everybody else, then everybody looks at you on the way down the aisle looking and saying, well, he must be a real sinner because he's not going to communion. So I'd go to communion. So here I went to confession to try to get rid of all my sins, but I walked out having 3 additional sins. So I didn't do very good. So then I thought, okay, I still need spirituality. So then I joined the Buddhist. But I had trouble with the Buddhists. They were lovely people, but they kept trying to get me to empty my mind. You're supposed to empty your mind and reach nirvana. But every time I closed my eyes, all I kept seeing was the men whose coons I had to touch, whose daduls I had to touch, all the lies that I told everybody. Then I quit that and I joined the Hindus. They were lovely people too. They taught me how to make vegetarian food, but the problem I had with them is in their lectures they kept coming up with the word karma. And they kept saying that all of our sufferings in this world are because of all the sins of the past world. And I think, Jesus, what did I do in the past lifetime? Was I Hitler? Was I Mussolini? What did I do to deserve all of this crap in this world? So I wasn't a good Hindu. Then I went to the Pentecostals, the Holy Rollers. I had a good time with them. I couldn't wait till every Sunday. Man, when that music started and they started singing and people started feeling the Holy Spirit, I could shake with the best of them. Only problem was, they were genuine and I couldn't get the Holy Spirit's telephone number. I joined the Jehovah's Witnesses. I liked them. I didn't mind people slamming their doors in my faces. I liked Jehovah's Witnesses. Only problem, I couldn't join them because I liked Halloween. But they were wonderful. And then one day I saw this advertisement that down at the Jewish synagogue, they were having Israeli dancing, Israeli folk dancing, and I thought, I haven't danced in decades. Maybe I can go and get the courage at least to dance, and that might be spiritual. But I couldn't dance. But I loved the stories. I went back over and over. I loved the stories, especially the stories about the Holocaust. Oh, it just wasn't about the 6 million Jews. It was about the 1 million gypsies that died in the camp, the 70,000 disabled kids and adults that Hitler killed. It was about the 100,000 homosexuals in the camps. I could relate, even though I couldn't relate. I could relate even though I couldn't relate. So I went back to college and I got a master's degree in Holocaust and Genocide Studies, and I became a storyteller. And I became quite well known in the community, even though I didn't associate with anybody. I would go and tell these stories, and people would love my stories about the Holocaust, especially the true ones. The ones that I said were true. They really thought they were true, and they really, oh my God, they would cry so hard when I would tell them that my grandfather and grandmother were Jews in Poland, and that they hid gypsies and homosexuals and disabled children in their barns. But when the Nazis found them, they took them to the concentration camps, and everybody died but my mother, who was 12 years old. And when she grew up and was released from the camp, she came to America, to Brooklyn, and she married my father, who was a rabbi, but she couldn't escape the mullah, the ghost of the concentration camp, so she killed herself, and my father was shamed. So my father's back in Poland, where he's the chief rabbi. People would cry their eyes out, and I'd go home thinking, God, I'm so talented. And then I'd wake up at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, just so ashamed of myself for such lying. So I was pretty desperate. And then one night, my Fatum smiled at me again. I was telling a story, and it was a Halloween festival. And I was telling a story about a little boy that had been sexually molested and killed and raped and killed. And his mother was devastated, and they never found who did it, but the boy's body was found in a cemetery on Halloween night. And so all of the people in the town collected money, and they built a little white alabaster statue over his grave. And in one hand, he was holding an alabaster prayer book. and on the other hand he was holding an alabaster quill pen. And the urban legend became that one day on Halloween night, the boy would rise from the grave, and whatever blood was left, he would write the name of his molester, his rapist, his killer. I was telling the story, and there was a man sitting in the back, and he was smiling, and I thought, why is he smiling? It's a horrible story. I could see how handsome he was, and he had a beautiful smile, and he had long black hair like Texer. He came up to me afterwards and said I was a wonderful storyteller. He had this accent, and I asked him where he was from, and he said he was from Romania. He said he was a storyteller too, and would I come hear him tell stories? And I said, when? He said, tomorrow night. And I said, oh, you're telling Halloween stories? And he said, no, I tell stories about love and romance and sensuality and sexuality. And I thought, how do you do that? I never heard such stories. So I went, and he was a marvelous storyteller. And he asked me to go out and have something to eat with him, and he took me to a Thai restaurant. And to this day, I think Thai restaurants are the place to make friends. He told me all about his life in Romania, and how he was sexually molested as a child, and how he was homeless when he ran away from home, and how he came to America and lived on the streets, and how he tried to get married. It was like my story, only he wasn't bachi-bazi. And I don't know if he knew how to dance. We became wonderful friends because he was the first person. He was the first person I trusted enough not to lie to. I told him the truth, and he didn't judge me. I did what any person's going to do who's a child of abuse and abandonment and rejection. I plotted in my mind how to push him away. When he didn't call me, I would imagine how much he hated me. He was abandoning me. But he was wise. And one day he said to me, you can't manipulate me, and you can't lie to me, because I cannot manipulate you and lie to you. But I do have to go back to Romania. I have to confront my ghosts, and so should you. And I said, what do you mean? He said, inside of you are two animals. One is an upside-down turtle that's buried in the sand of your soul. And that turtle represents forgiveness. And you're never going to be healthy until you take that turtle and turn it upright and take it out from the sand and release it into the ocean waters and let it swim away. And there's another animal inside you, and that's the animal of revenge, and it's the alligator in your mind. And until you can lure that alligator back into the swamp, you will never heal. And finally he said, you must do as I'm doing. You must go and confront your ghost. In my dialect, we call it mulo. And then he said, and you must dance again. And I thought, I will never dance again. I haven't danced in decades. Dancing was my blessing up until the age of 7. And then dancing became my curse. He left. He promised. He promised he would text, and we would email, and he did for a while, and I did for a while, but eventually he didn't respond to my texts or my emails, and I don't know what happened to him. He just faded away. There's a beautiful saying from the Middle East. We come into each other's lives because we are each other's questions and answers. And we leave each other's lives when there are no more questions and answers to exchange. But it was nice to feel I had someone I could trust and I could love. It was nice to feel I had a friend. And then one day, I decided to do something that I never thought I would do. I decided to go back to Afghanistan, to the village. So I did. Of course, I went with a new identity. Nobody recognized me. I walked in with a 3-piece suit in a car with a briefcase. I told everybody I was a New York Times reporter and I was there to do a story on the Taliban, and I needed to interview people. I had lots of money with me, so guess what? I passed out coins and coins and coins, and everybody was telling me their stories, and the one thing I wanted to know was, where was my mother and where was my father? Even my grown brothers and sisters didn't recognize me. But I knew who my one brother was, the one that called me Kesefat with my father decades ago. And I gave him tons of money. And he took me to the hut where my mother, this crinkled, wrinkled old woman, sat drinking tea. I don't know if she recognized me or not. I asked her a few questions. She didn't want to talk. I asked her where her husband was. She looked at me like she might have recognized me at the moment. She said he was in the room, but I couldn't go visit him because he was dying. The art of money. I said, here's money. It'll take care of you and your children and your grandchildren after your husband dies. And my older brother, still not knowing who I was, escorted me into my father's bedroom, and there he was laying on the pillows and blankets. He was in and out of consciousness, I guess, because he was delirium, and when he opened his eyes and looked at me, he stared at me, and I don't think he recognized me, or maybe he did, but I know the one thing he said to me was, "Are you the Pari who's come to take me to paradise?" And at that moment, I wanted to bend down and whisper in his ear, "I'm the goddamn devil that's come to drag you to hell." But I didn't. Because these words from the famous Romanian playwright Eugen Ionesco in his little-known play, Exit the King, for some reason crossed my mind. And as I stood there looking at my dad who was dying, I remembered those words from the play when Queen Marguerite says to the prince who's been abused, "There are still cords which bind you that I haven't yet untied, that I haven't yet cut. There are still hands that cling to you that make it difficult for you to move. This is not the real you. It's an odd collection of bits and pieces, horrid little things that live on you like parasites. Leave it to me now. Go and be a good boy. There's no need for self-defense anymore. No one wants to hurt you now." And I bent down, and I kissed my father on both cheeks. And I said, "Go to paradise. I am your Pari." I walked out of the house. I didn't say goodbye to anybody. I walked out of the village, tossing coins, watching kids running for them. Got into my car and drove away. I went to the city, and I bought myself a pair of pantaloons, women's pantaloons. I hadn't worn them in decades. I bought myself a woman's caftan, a white one. And I got in the car, and I drove to the first house of the two men that bought me from my father. It was empty. The Taliban had destroyed it. But I stood there, and I remembered, and I closed my eyes, and I imagined the upside-down turtle in the sand of my soul, and I picked it up, and I imagined myself walking along the beach and taking it to the ocean, and I put it down, and I said, "You must swim away." And the turtle turned around and looked at me and said, "But we've been together for so long." And I said, "And I know I will miss you. God, there will be moments I will miss you, but you must swim away. You must leave me. But I will always remember you, my unforgiven turtle. I must now release you." And it swam away. I got in my car, and I went back to the bazaar, and I bought more scarves, women's scarves. And I bought me a CD player, and I bought me a CD. And I went to the home of Sarah. There were still boys there, Bachibazi boys still there. The tradition never ends, does it? And I put on the CD and I played the music. And I thought, this time I'm not dancing for men. I'm going to dance for me. I'm going to dance. And when I move my arms, it will be to call upon the energies of survival. And when I'm stomping, it will be to dance out all of the sadness in my heart. And when I'm shaking, it will be to shiver out all of the hatred I have and the need for revenge. And when I'm twirling and twirling, it will be to celebrate the fact that I'm still goddamn alive. I will dance for the first time in decades. And I did. And I put on the CD, and the music began. And I walked around the courtyard. And I danced. I began to dance. For me, I danced. I got in the car. I went back to the hotel. I turned off everything in my mind. I left the CD in the CD player, and I got on the plane, and I went home. And here I am, with you. So, that's why I want to be famous. That's why I want to be on the show, Talent, Truth, and Whoppers. Because one thing I learned was that real revenge, that alligator. The real revenge isn't revenge about destroying the men who made me play with their dados. The real revenge is not to destroy myself. And so, I think if I make the finals, and they put on the music that I love so much, and I could say to everybody, well, it's mostly older women that watch your show. But if I told my mystery story, then maybe men who have been sexually abused will hear it. They say that there's 21 million American men walking around in silent shame who have been sexually abused. They say that 1 every 6 college students in an American university have been sexually abused. Maybe in the finale we could go into a football stadium and fill it up with men who have been sexually abused. And then they could put on the music and we could dance. And when we dance, we could suddenly start saying, no one wants to hurt us anymore. 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 So thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. So I'm going to ask you if anybody wants to speak. One is, how do you think that a child who has been sexually abused, male or female, could use the arts of dance or music or theater or painting or photography to use along their healing journey from abuse? 2 is, how do you think the arts could be instrumental in helping people of any trauma whatsoever in the healing journey towards forgiveness? And the 3rd question is, what do you do? What do you do with a child or an adult, a husband or wife, who is in that frame of mind where they can't forgive the person that hurt them? Because we've all been hurt. And how do we forgive ourselves for any of the lies or things or the manipulations that we've done in life? Anybody have anything they would like to share? Nancy?
Yes, whole bunch, and I'm not sure how to articulate it well, but thank you for the courage to share your story. I am a therapist, as you may know, and I also do art. I think having a voice, being able to express it, being able to say what they did, what has happened, I have a choice whether I keep living in the past and according to their description of who I am, or I find a different path that is mine and take my power back. Because the power that was taken, I have a choice whether I keep giving it away or saying, I am. And whether that's through song or through movement or through a collage. I'm going to be doing a group at Renown shortly. And one of the things that I've done with other groups is to encourage people to draw something, draw or write words of something that they've been carrying for a long time that no longer serves them well, and to throw it away. And whether that's a memory, whether that's guilt, whether that's a particular message, I don't have to live as if that were true. We do what we do to survive, best way we know how. And hopefully we can learn and do something a little different and share the path with someone else that is also searching.
Thank you. Anyone? Evan?
Joe,
Yes.
I think
Sure.
the kids 12 to 18 should see your show because it may make them come out more and let us know what's going on with them. Because this was a great show.
Thank you.
And I think it told a story and maybe it'll help them use that for themselves.
Thank you. Let me ask about forgiveness. There's nobody here that I assume has never been hurt by anyone. And I'm assuming we've all hurt someone, maybe certainly unintentionally. Forgiveness for a lot of people in any form, whether they've been betrayed by a friend or a spouse, whether someone stole something from them, or they've been abused or whatever. How do we reach that stage of forgiveness? Because the word forgiveness seems so esoteric. Nancy?
I think a lot of us believe that forgiveness means saying it was okay. It doesn't have to mean it was okay. What happened often wasn't okay. But how much are we going to let that weigh down our soul and rob the current moment and the future moments of possibility? To be able to move beyond what has happened for a different definition of possibility and of ourselves. Because if I spend a lot of time giving them free rent space in my head, being focused on revenge, then where is my soul and where is my spirit today? It doesn't mean that what happened should have happened. It did, and now what? To be able to shift energy and focus, not to say it was okay, but hopefully to learn from it and to create a different kind of life. It's my thought.
Thank you. Gentlemen, any gentleman would like to say something from a man's perspective? Go ahead. Your first, tell the camera your first name.
My first name is Uchenna.
Oh, what a
Hi.
gorgeous name.
I would say that from a man's point of view, seeking help, seeking some sort of a community where you can actually talk and share some of your grievances, or just sort of get feedback from other people who have actually gone through the same things as you have. And so I think that's one sort of avenue, whether you're man, woman, whoever, kid, adult, doesn't really matter. I think coming across that community and tapping into that source is very powerful for those who are going through that.
If I may, thank you so much for sharing that. If I may, I think one of the difficulties for boys, men, is that when you're a boy who's been sexually abused or molested, there is a stigma that you're going to deal from other boys. And I think, not to downplay anything, when unfortunately that travesty happens of young girls, ladies who are abused, we see in foster care certainly, you usually have a female social worker or a female counselor, a female principal to go to, a female therapist to go to. For boys, I think there's an extra layer of shame that you're going to be rejected by the other boys. You know, I know that, like, you know, in certain religious groups, that you are molested by a clergy member, and it doesn't matter what religion. You could be ostracized. That's why people have kept quiet for so long. There was something in the newspaper today that I think in the New York Times, that a school in Upper New York has finally admitted that 4 of their male teachers have been sexually abusing boys all the way back into the 60s and 70s. And that the main predator has now escaped to like Lebanon or someplace where he can't be extradited. But what's coming out is that people knew about it. And you didn't report because in certain religions, if you reported it, I remember doing this show for a conference of like 100 therapists and social workers and judges at 4 o'clock in the afternoon after they listened to PowerPoint presentations all day. And then I come out and do this. Which is kind of neat because they just booked me to be their keynote speaker at the next conference. So I don't know if they want me to dance or not. But I remember afterwards, so many people coming up to me and wanting to talk privately about their abuse. And so much of it was from clergy members, their abuse. And the one theme of the story was when they told a member of their family, like a parent, they were told to shut up, because the family didn't want to be ostracized from that congregation. So, you know, I just bring that up, and then you bring up about the support. If you did some research, you will find there are very few support groups in the United States that are there for men who have been sexually abused. Very few, because again, what 50-year-old, 60-year-old man wants to come along and say to his wife or his children, let me tell you, sit down and let me tell you something that happened to me when I was a kid. You keep it quiet. When I was writing this script, I got on a support group online this is true, 100%. I got on an online support group of men from around the country, there were 8 of them, who had been, none of them had ever met each other. But they were all online every Monday, and each one of them had been sexually abused as a child or a teenager. And they were all men in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. And the therapist who was facilitating it online was a student at the university getting his BA in psychology. What I noticed within 10 minutes is everybody had to have been telling the same old story over and over and over. And when I interrupted and said, I'm new here, and this is my name, and I am working on a theater show about healing from sexual abuse, what have you done, may I ask, in your healing journey? And there was dead silence. And then somebody, after a moment, said, oh, and that damn bitch of mine. And then someone said, why do you keep calling her that name? Well, she's my 4th wife. And then he went back into the self-pity routine of, I can't, you know, that person that abused me, he's ruined my marriages, and blah, 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 blah. And it went on, and I hung up. Because it just seemed so non-productive. But you could tell this, you were trapped. Just like what I tried to show in this story, he was trapped, the character was trapped in creating new identities. I wanted to keep new identities because I couldn't stand who I really was. So I thank you so much. I think it's a little bit harder for men to come out and say, I've been abused. And I think it's harder for men, and some men, you may absolutely think that as a man, I might not say this. I absolutely believe it's harder for men to forgive than it is for women to forgive.
Well, there's such an expectation of being strong and taking charge. The powerlessness is hard for anybody, but for men in our society, it is even harder because that goes against the sense of being right or good or, what is expected.
I saw, and I'll finish with this, and I would like to, if anybody else would like to share. Let me finish this with this, Evan, and then we'll get Evan. Evan, can we come closer? Come sit with me. Can someone push Evan closer here? I worked in hospice with dying, and one of the things that really made me think about all of this for years was because the number of people that had been given the word from their physician that you are terminally ill and you might have 2 months, 6 months, or whatever. The one thing I saw was a common theme on the journey was people who wish they had seen and talked to their sister. They haven't talked to their sister in 20 years. They haven't talked to their son or daughter in 15 years. They wish they could find their ex-husband, and this whole concept of, I remember one lady saying to me, I don't even know what I fought my sister about, but we haven't spoken in 22 years. What do you think she would do if I called her up right now? It was this concept of forgiveness. And that is what really, truly fascinates me. I was doing this performance, and I didn't know, it was in another state, there was a packed audience, a packed theater, and I didn't know that a lot of people in the audience were children of Holocaust parents. Now, these were older people, obviously. And I was crying from things people were saying to me. And I went upstairs to the dressing room, and the producer came up and said, you need to come downstairs. There's a group of senior citizens sitting in the corner, and they're all talking about releasing the turtle. And so I went down, and they were talking about, we don't know if we have forgiven the Nazis that we've never met for what they did to our grandparents or our parents. We don't know if we even have the right to be angry, or we don't even know if we have how do you get rid of the alligator? Do I even have the right to have an alligator of revenge? I want revenge. I want revenge. And I remember saying to myself, we read all of these books, we go to faith-based groups, self-help groups, whatever, and we talk or hear or preach to about forgiveness. But when do we address the subject of revenge? If you look at all the school shootings that we deal with, every one of those kids that does the school shooting does it for the purpose of revenge. How do we teach kids? How would we have reached all of those kids to release the turtle of forgiveness instead of keeping the alligator of revenge? Those shootings may never have taken place. Okay, my beautiful Evan, I'm going to come sit next to you. Okay, now you've got to talk real slow so I can hear. This is Evan, one of my favorite people on earth.
I've used theater to make my own self be heard.
Evan said he has used theater to make his own self be heard.
And you can use theater as a medium to ask for forgiveness.
And you can use theater as a medium for healing towards forgiveness.
Theater can do stuff that theater can't do in real life.
You can do things in theater that you can't do in real life.
In other words, place your inner demons to the theater, and they'll about forgiveness.
Start over. Say it again.
You can make your inner demons forgive your demons to the theater.
You can use the theater to work towards a happy ending and make things better.
I'm in the process of writing my own musical.
He's in the process of writing his own musical.
I'm using theater to help keep the into myself, bring out all the frustrations I have being a handicapped person.
He's using theater and writing his own musical to bring out all of the frustrations he experiences as a handicapped
I
person.
have to deal with the excess and drivers, and they treat me like I'm 5 years old.
Because people treat him like he's 5 years old.
And I can use theater to say, you sons of bitches.
He said he can use theater to say, "You sons of bitches."
And I can't do that in real life.
You can't do it in real
I
life.
can't say anything, oh, they can walk away. But in the theater, I'm given power.
In the theater, he has his power.
And the theater, I can use the power to heal myself with all the frustrations I have.
He can use theater to heal himself from the frustrations he has.
So I've used it for 26 years.
He's used theater for 26
And
years.
thank God I worked.
And thank God it worked. Well, thank you, Evan. So thank you for coming. It's just, I would like, when we are doing this kind of stuff, I was just performing in Florida at a national solo festival. And these are all former performers in New York City and all of this, they still are, who all have designed one-person shows. And it wasn't planned this way. But what came out was many of the one-person shows dealt with the subject of forgiveness and dealt with the subject of healing. We here at Laughing Owl Productions are starting to talk and consult about having Reno become a national theater festival. There are over 150 solo theater festivals in this United States. It would be wonderful to bring performers from New York City, former Broadway people, Los Angeles people here to Reno, to Laughing Owl Productions, and do one-person shows like this. I'll give you two examples. In Florida, there was a young lady whose one-person musical was so funny and so devastatingly poignant and tragic. Her show was about her healing journey from being raped so severely that during the rape her stomach exploded. And she had 27 operations and 3 years in the hospital without anything to eat or drink. Tubes. But there were moments it was so hysterical because she could laugh, and there were moments you just held back the tears, and then she turned it into a musical where she sang songs. There was another woman that did a one-woman show on her journey of healing from breast cancer. And what her show was about was not the treatments and all of this, it was about her sexuality and that how she lost her sexuality. It was so poignant and so funny and so beautiful. And they all want to come here to Reno and perform it. And I want to invite the whole School of Medicine at UNR to come to Laughing Out Productions. So whether it's a show like this, on healing from sexual abuse and betrayal, for me, this show, I wrote it about the healing from sexual abuse, but one thing that came out of it for me in healing really was dealing with the betrayal of a parent. That is a real hard thing to forgive, especially when the parent's dead. But that would be so neat to have Reno's National Solo Festival, where local performers, Broadway performers, LA, San Francisco came here, and maybe the whole theme of the whole festival was about healing and forgiveness and all of that. So, Nancy?
That could be a year-long event
Yes.
with something every week, in addition to whatever other performances, because there are so many stories that may be worth hearing and seeing and sharing.
So, Evan, start writing your one-man musical.
Everybody dances.
And then, Evan, you'll sing and I'll dance. Okay, so thank you for coming, and thank you to Dave and Angela for having us here. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. You're all wonderful.
Thanks, everybody.
You're all wonderful.